To be able to understand the presented way of dog training, I would like to start up with some theoretical ideas. Let us first of all agree to the system to maintain the Gebrauchshund. Through this, it will become obvious that training is a very central aspect of breeding. Since years and years, the Schutzhund trial has proved to be an effective criteria of selection. Therefore, I suggest to analyze the Schutzhund 3 Schutzdienst. The handler and his dog enter the field in the heel position. Let us call this situation pressing obedience, or simply blue. The dog follows the commands of searching and eventually gets to the helper in the thick splint. Now he starts to bark and like this changes to the aggression part. Let us call this situation pressing aggression, or simply gray. He shall stay in this gray situation until the handler calls him heel. This means he has to change back to pressing obedience, which is blue. He will stay in blue and be transported in blue to the place he has to lay down and wait for the helpers to start a flight. Now he is to react upon his body language and start to bite. Let's call this situation pressing prey, or simply green. Once the helper stands still, the handler gives a command out, and the dog is supposed to change back into gray. And back to green once the helper moves. Afterwards, the handler gives a command out, and the dog shall change to gray again. Obeying the commands of the handler, the dog will then change into blue and stay in blue during the back transport. Reacting to the body language of the helper, the dog shall change to green and again, according to his handler command, back to gray. Then there will be the command sit, which is equivalent to changing into blue, and the side transport, which is also a blue part. The dog should stay in blue until the beginning of the long distance flight. This will lead to a change into green. At the command out, he will change to gray and back to green once the helper starts moving again. And again, change to gray with the command out. Finally, the handler gives a command sit, step back, which will lead to blue, and that's it. Done everything alright? That will be 100 points. According to this Schutzdienst, only consists of 3 positions of functional sectors: blue, green, gray, and 6 drive changes. That's all. Now there are 2 questions arousing. First of all, how do I get to the point that blue, green and gray are stable phases? And second, how do I teach perfect drive changes? The answer to the first one is easy. A stool with 3 legs always stands stable. So far, we have seen that the functional sector can be either green, blue or gray, and soon we will realize that it can also be orange. The three forces which keep the functional sector stable are called drive, technical or instrumental, compulsion, and compulsion to activate. The art in training is to use those forces in the right doses and at the right time. Let's shortly remind ourselves of a former seminars. There we have learned that the four motors, hunger, love, flight and aggression, drive us to look for an optimum of personal fitness, to be capable to transport our genetic material in the best possible way. Every living being has been programmed through years and years of evolution to look for a maximum of personal comfort. Passing this on to the dog training, one should realize that it will become necessary that the three forces don't act, or are at least evenly balanced, as long as the dog is working in the correct functional sector. This is comfortable. And that those forces should start to interfere once the dog leaves the functional sector to make it uncomfortable. To work this right, you need to have understood the principles of learning. By positive reinforcement, and that means by immediate positive reinforcement, the dog gets to know very quickly and easily about the white islands, which offer a maximum of comfort, and also how to get there. This way of learning is called instrumental conditioning, which means learning of certain behavior and movements. And this way of learning demands for immediate reinforcement. Whereas intensity and eagerness within the functional sector is caused by intermittent reinforcement. If the dog did so far only find out about the right way by immediate positive reinforcement and intermittent positive reinforcement, I'm repeating one more time, only by positive reinforcement so far, I also like to call it he got to know about his highway. Then, and only then, you can go on to cementing the things he has learned. And this is done by negative reinforcement. He will get a negative reinforcement, which means it will become uncomfortable for him once he starts to take a foot off of the highway. From now on, and only from now on, one may use electric collars in case it is probably prepared and used with know-how. It is not beatable by any other conventional method in terms of effectiveness and ethics. Anyone who claims the opposite, or perhaps even doubts the necessity of negative reinforcement at all, is not only incompetent and ignorant, but also a fool. While the dog got to know his highway by positive reinforcement, in terms of instrumental conditioning, he will be cemented in his functional sector in terms of classical conditioning. The dog learns to associate orange, green, gray, blue to certain situations, which means linking drive moods to situations. Once again, in drive pressing, the dog gets to know his highway by positive reinforcement, and by intermittent reinforcement he learns to accelerate on his highway. And in compulsion pressing, the dog's right behavior is cemented. The highway is being secured by crash barriers. The effect is that in full pressing, the dog is classically conditioned to certain situations. Getting back to the Schutzhund trial and to the question of how to teach perfect drive changes. In general, you can say that the dog learned those by instrumental conditioning. Let's now take a look at some very important rules of learning and teaching. The dog is a genius in recognizing body language and anticipating situations and movements. In this regard, he is far beyond our own possibilities. Whereas in regarding of understanding spoken language, he is rather a cripple. This leads to the fact that whenever acoustic and body language are offered simultaneously, the dog only learns the body language. Furthermore, a dog realizes very quickly that his handler voice is not helpful at all, if the handler is one of those who keeps on chatting permanently. For the dog to be able to learn commands and not to make wrong connections to the handler's body language, timing is a most important tool. As Pavlov taught us, the bell needs to be rang before the food is offered, which means the command needs to be given before handler's body action. If I want to separate the handler's approach to the dog and the dog standing up, the handler will need to wait at least 5 seconds at the dog's side before giving the command to sit. On the other hand, if I'm working on stabilizing gray, green or blue, I will have to wait for gray, green or blue to be carried out probably for at least 5 seconds before reinforcing the dog's behavior. In this context, it's also very important to know that next exercise is the best way of reinforcing a dog which has already understood about what's going on. Well, what other rules do we need to take into consideration? Dog training is conflict management. Alfred Hahn once said very wisely, "A dog which I have to beg, please, please, please work with me, that is not a real Gebrauchshund." According to this, a Gebrauchshund obviously has drive. Nevertheless, with this drive he will never achieve 100 points, which happens to be what we are attempting to achieve. Therefore, we set up forces to manipulate this drive, and this leads to our conflict. The dog aims for one thing, and we aim for another thing. In general, there are 2 ways out of a conflict for dogs as well as for humans. Either you try to get away from the conflict and you do blue, or you are a different type of character and you start being active, hyperactive, or maybe even aggressive. And you do gray, which means you try to solve the problem in your way of thinking. This brings us back to pressing and reinforcement. The art of dog training is to eventually use those three forces in the right doses and the right timing, to either cause conflict there where you need them, to create or to sterilize gray, blue or green, or on the other hand, to leave conflicts away whenever gray, blue or green should not be disturbed. What it comes down to is either conflict by accident, which would be bad, or conflict on purpose, which would be good. Now we need to talk about how do I communicate with my dog. In general, I got two options, body language and acoustics. With both of them, I got three levels to be used. The level of praising, the level of technical information, and the level of compulsion. Overall, 2 times 3, this makes 6 tools to create black and white or to lead technically. Having gathered all this previous knowledge, we now have to ask for the methods and the procedures to teach the dog the right behavior within the ring. It turned out to be very helpful for training to add a fourth functional sector, as long as a dog has not yet probably learned how to move and behave within the ring. We shall call this gap holder orange or open. And like this we have 4 sectors: orange, gray, blue and green. At first we show the dog how to get to green, blue and gray, starting from orange. And once he has learned this, we will start moving on the ring. Let us quickly count the sectors the dog has to get to know. We have 1 orange sector, we have 1 gray sector. The blue sector needs to be separated into passive and active obedience. And it turned out to be helpful to separate the green sector into 3 parts: moving prey, non-moving prey, technical exercising with non-moving prey. After all, we will have 16 exercises which the dog has to learn. We start off with orange. 3 green sectors need to be taught. 2 blue sectors need to be taught. And 1 gray sector need to be taught. Furthermore, the dog will learn to change from the middle to the 3 ring positions. Once from orange to green, once from orange to gray, and once from orange to blue. And finally, there will be the drive changes within the ring, from green to blue, and back from blue to green, from green to gray, and back from gray to green, and eventually from blue to gray, and back from gray to blue. If the dog does all that perfectly, you will get your 100 points in Schutzdienst. Perhaps we should go through all these 16 exercises, because that shall make it easier to you to understand all this. Note, the order in which those exercises are taught is definitely variable and does not need to take place in the same order they are numbered, but it might be useful. Exercise 0. The first exercise is orange or open. The dog should either be held with a tight leash or directly in the normal collar. This causes a feeling of being held back, which arouses attention and excitement. Start the dog to go backwards. The tight leash is elevated, and does the dog start to go forward, the tight leash carefully holds him. This exercise is being used to fill out pauses and also to give the dog a chance to recover. It's absolutely necessary that no word is spoken, otherwise the dog connects acoustics with indifferent chaos. Exercise 1. Exercise 1 is a drive change from orange to green. In this exercise there is also no need for acoustics. Possibilities to initiate this change are giving a bite, doing an attack, possibly with reinforcement and carrying the arm. Exercise 2. As we already mentioned before, it's easier for the dog to learn body language than spoken language. And because of this, there is again no need for commands during this exercise. The helper calls this, with his actions, proper prey behavior from the dog. 4 tools may generally be helpful for doing this. Round wave-like movements, the tight leash, giving a rebite, reinforcing the dog's full body movements. Furthermore, he may also put those tools together. Exercise 3. In this exercise, the dog learns to stay in green even with a non-moving arm. The handler's right hand underneath the dog's jaw means to the dog, prey is allowed. And the handler's left hand behind the dog's ear means to the dog, don't change drive. Through this the dog learns tension and relaxing by the black and the white hand, linked with the compulsory command no and the praising command brav. No is one of the most important commands in training and education. No causes conflict, and working your way through a conflict shapes your character. Exercise 4. In addition to the body language the dog has already learned in exercise 3, he will now learn to carry out technical exercises which he had already been taught in obedience before, also in Schutzdienst, while staying in prey behavior. He learns to stay in the green sector despite technical demands. Exercise 5. The first possibility for the dog to leave the green phase is a drive change into passive blue. The right hand is taken away from the jaw and put onto the arm, but only with a technical command out. The dog is supposed to let go of the arm. There is no compulsion so far. Instead, the dog is rather being talked out of the arm. And once he is outside, he will immediately be praised with hand and voice as reinforcement. And the black hand must only occur if the dog tries to get back into the arm once he was already out of it. Exercise 6. The dog learns the command bleib, and the handler learns to act underneath the threshold. Exercise 7. The dog is now being taught how to change from orange to gray, and simultaneously he should associate the command for barking. Step by step. The handler is in the open position in the normal collar. Softly he tightens up the spike collar with his right hand. Now the command for barking has to be given. The bell needs to ring before the food, remember Pavlov. And finally, he changes with the left hand into the spike collar with a hard but still well-dosed jerk. This causes plenty of conflict, which is, as we have seen before, the proper attraction for aggressive behavior. Now, while being gently held back with a carefully tightened spike collar, the dog figures out how to work his way through this aggression sector. He shall chase in the spike collar. Exercise 8. It is not acoustics, but again body language of the helper what makes a dog change into green again. And the helper now uses his abilities to work out an at least 5-second lasting green phase. Exercise 9. Electric collar and spike collar can do only one thing. They can cause conflict, and therefore every fool uses them to create blue, whereas every smart one uses them to create gray. Since in exercise 7 the dog already linked spike collar with the gray sector, we will now intensify and cement what he has learned by intermittent and negative reinforcement. At the same time the dog figures out to neutrally accept the neutral coming and going of this handler. In this exercise the dog needs to act according to the situation, and therefore acoustics must not be used. Exercise 10. This trains the drive change from orange to blue. The dog will learn to change according to an obedience command from general activity to proper passive blue or to active blue. Exercise 11. Even though the dog already realized that spike collar causes gray, he will now be held with a spike collar in active blue. Very important is to take care that the blue phases stay active this time. Exercise 12. Exercise 12 trains the drive change from passive blue into gray in two different ways. Exercise 13. This exercise trains the drive change from passive blue into green, and alternatively from active blue into green. Exercise 14. Only now, quite at the end of the learning process, the dog gets to know the drive change from green to gray, since beforehand he only got to know the drive change from green to blue. Exercise 15. Last but not least is the changing from gray to blue, either with the handler standing next to his dog or calling him heel from behind. This should be all. Now I wish you plenty of fun with Jörg and Aristo.